Hi there, this is Sam of Core Yoga, and I'd like to take you through a short post-run flow. The objective of this flow is to really allow the heart rate to come down, to stimulate our parasympathetic nervous system after we've really energized the body, bringing out an element of balance, and also to allow the body an opportunity to stretch, to lengthen those tighter muscles, to release the connective tissue, particularly around the hip space, and lastly, to allow our body to recover so that we are ready for our next run. You might want to have a block or a book or a cushion or a blanket for a couple of the poses as we travel through the practice. So imagine you've just come back from a run. Maybe you have just come back from a run. We're going to start in downward facing dog. So bring your hands underneath your shoulders and your knees underneath your hips. So you're on all fours. This is a lovely, perfect position for you to tuck under the toes, lift the hips and come into a downward facing dog. So just allow yourself some time to slow down the energy that's traveling through the body. Bending alternate knees, drawing the heels towards the floor. Getting some length in the back of the calves and to the hamstrings. And then come to stillness in your downward facing dog. Soften the knees a little. Press the hands into the floor. And like you're trying to push the floor away from you, do that as you lift your sit bones a little higher towards the sky. Keep the knees soft. You're getting some lovely length into the spine, the muscles in the lower back that connect to the pelvis and causes tightness down the back of our legs. So by softening the knees, we can just access into this space too. Then take a breath in, and as you exhale, come back to all fours. We're now going to come and lie on our belly. Bring our elbows directly underneath our shoulders and our hands out in front of us. And bring your hands together in prayer. It just gives you something to push against. And then the back of the wrists press down into the floor. And then with that, continue that pressure into the forearms. So we're going to start this pose pretty active. And we're going to hold it for 5 breaths. And then we're going to allow the pose to get passive. So from here, press the forearms down into the floor and lift the head and chest a little. And then draw the back of the skull just a little bit back. Then as you ground these forearms down, squeeze your shoulder blades and pull your forearms towards you. A little bit, use your butt muscles, give them a little squeeze and feel that sense of length in the posture. So we've used our hips pretty repetitively as we run. Whether we've done a longer, slower run or of higher intensity, shorter bursts, we repetitively ask the hip flexors to work for us. This is, in my opinion, a really nice stretch. I do it so regularly to lengthen out the long, thin muscle that is your psoas. So your psoas muscle is connected to the thigh, the pelvis, and the lower back. And that muscle somewhere along that chain can get pretty constricted from repetitive movement patterns. So now we've been here a good 5 rounds of breath, I just want you to soften a little bit in the pose. This turns the pose a little more yin, a little more restorative. Close your eyes, relax your feet. Relax your inner thighs. Relax your bum. Now notice the sensations in the lower back. If this is not nice for your lower back, then move the elbows forward until it feels nice in your lower back. Particularly if you know you're pretty tight in the front of the hips, If you spend a lot of your time seated at a desk, this is going to be a slightly uncomfortable position for you. However, some people will be really mobile in this direction. Not me. But if you are mobile in this direction, then bring your hands and place them on the far corners of your mat. Push into the hands and straighten your arms. So it's the same pose, just deeper. And notice, if you come here and your butt muscles start to fire and your inner thighs start to fire, know that you've gone too far. So come right back to your elbows. And then I'm going to leave us here for about 60 seconds. And as we stay here, take your breath into the front of the chest. And as you exhale, feel the whole body soften and relax. Inhale into the front of the chest. And exhale, let it go. And just stay here with your breath for about another 3 or 4 deep rounds. And then slowly bring your elbows out to the side and allow your head just to rest on your hands a little bit. You may have noticed at one point in that pose I tucked under my toes. You might experience this as well, which is why I'm pointing it out. If I spend a lot of time on my bike or running and I'm pointing my toes, sometimes when I'm extending my front body, I'm getting a bit of cramp around my foot. And when I get cramp, I can't relax the muscles. There's some tension hanging on. So I just tucked my toes under to release the sensation of cramp until that went, and then I pointed my toes. Many people that spend a lot of time running will find that it's actually maybe just as comfortable to have both your toes tucked under. Feel what's good for your body. So with those toes tucked under now, everybody tuck them under. Press into the floor and you're going to come onto your knees. Now this is going to have a lot of variation in the pose depending on the tension in the soles of your feet and into your calf muscles. So we're going to tuck the toes under as best we can. We either stay here or we allow our hips to draw towards our heels. So if the hips don't quite get all the way to the heels, then we bring a cushion, a pillow or something underneath our bum. If we have the mobility to take the hips to the heels, then do that. Now wherever you get, this is pretty intense on the front of the shin and into the sole of the foot. It's an intense stretch, intense flexion for the toes. So the sensation is going to arrive. And it's your job as we stay here in this pose to allow an element of softness and acceptance of this sensation. You're going to bring your hands behind your back, either grab your wrists or your elbows, and you'll notice that will push an arch in your back. Draw your navel in a little bit to get that pelvis into neutral so you're not pushing the chest forward. And just soften and settle here, close off your eyes. Bring your attention to the space in the center of your forehead. That's called your third eye. And focus on that space, almost the furthest space from the physical sensation. And every time you inhale, draw the breath into that space. And every time you exhale, feel the body and the mind soften a little. So we're accessing a thick piece of fascia in the sole of the foot, your plantar fascia. So many runners have heard of plantar fascia because plantar fasciitis is a very common overuse injury brought about by running. If you've ever suffered with plantar fasciitis, you know that it hangs around for a long time and it pretty much stops you from running. Many runners don't want to stop running. So bringing some length and allowing that piece of fascia an opportunity to lengthen is super important for the health of our feet, allowing us to stay running. So stay here, 3 more breaths. Try and keep that out breath as soft as possible. Maybe the out breath a little longer than the in. Good. Slowly, don't be in a hurry. Walk your hands forward, blink your eyes open. Lift up your feet and just rotate your ankles or do whatever feels good. Right now you're getting a sensation in your feet that's called the rebound. That sensation is perfectly normal. And then tops of the feet, just bang them on the floor. Good, nice. From here, we'll just take a couple rounds of cat-cow before we come back into a down dog to get into the hips. Inhale, drop the belly, arch through the back. Exhale, push the floor away from you. So a couple of counter poses in between the longer holds. A little bit of movement in between the longer holds. Last one. Good. As you come into angled cat, stay there, tuck the toes, lift the hips, downward facing dog. Separating those shoulder blades, allowing the head to relax. Then turn the heels in and the toes out so you look like Charlie Chaplin. And then bend the left knee and draw the right heel towards or to the floor. Then push the floor away from you like you did in the beginning and turn your chest underneath that right arm. So we're just going to hold this for about 5 breaths on each side. It's just going to prep the hips for what's to come. So this particular stretch is stretching the muscle around the outer edge of the hip on the right side at the moment. We're going to come back to the center, bend the right knee, draw the left heel to or towards the floor, and turn the chest under the left armpit. And then in a short moment, we're going to come to some stretches that access the same group of muscles and then get into the connective tissue around that space. So into the fascia, the ligaments and the tendons. To hydrate the ligaments and tendons and to release the fascia, allowing it to better glide through and over the muscles. And then come back to the center. Walk your feet forwards into a forward fold. So if you have low blood pressure, this won't be a very nice place to be, particularly when you get up. So if you have low blood pressure, come down and sit on the floor with your legs out in front of you and allow the body to fold towards the thighs, and don't be fussed how close to the thighs it gets. If you are okay upside down, then just hang upside down, grab the elbows, and we're going to be here for about another 6 or so rounds of breath. So feeling the breath now and traveling it into the back of the ribs. And feel the out breath and allow the body to let go on the out breath. So the longer you hold here, the more we can release the tension in the back of the hips. And the back of the hips are connected to the back of the torso and the shoulders, and connected to the back of the legs and the feet. So we are releasing here along a piece of fascia called the superficial back line that runs actually from the toes and incorporates that plantar fascia that we were just talking about.
Plantar fasciitis is basically a tension in the fascia in the sole of the foot. Now that tension pulls on its attachment point in the heel. So that either pulls the heel under, or it does pull the heel under, and then if you're then tight in your Achilles as well, it's pulling the other way, and it all becomes really congested under there. By loosening up the whole chain, you get some space purely in any particular part of the liner fascia. In this instance, we're talking about the sole of the foot. And then from here, we're going to come all the way down to the floor, and we're going to come to sit. So we've got a couple of options here depending on your physical body. So you might have your cushion or your block, and you might find that actually sitting on a block's really nice here. You're going to bring your left heel towards your right butt cheek on the outer edge. So we're going into cow face pose, and cow face pose will look very different in many bodies. If this is really high and you think, actually I can get my bum all the way to the floor, great, do that. Prop it up as much as you need. So left heel is that right outer butt cheek, and then the right heel towards the left outer butt cheek. I press into the floor to shimmy my legs around to bring one knee on top of the other knee. You might not look like this, you might look like this, totally fine. If you look like this, totally fine. If you're unable to get both of your sit bones down, then just undo the bottom leg. You'll get a bit more into hamstring, but you'll still get into that outer hip. Good. So from your cow face pose, bring your hands by your hips. Take a breath in, press the sit bones down and lengthen the spine. And then as you exhale, just walk your hands forward. So you're only going to go as far as your body allows. You'll reach what we call the edge, and that's where your body goes, that's enough. And then that's where you stop. So rather than in a traditional yang variation of a pose where we might really work to get deep, we're just going until our body says stop. We might be here, we might be here, we might be here. Many variations of exactly the same pose. What I want you to be aware of skeletally right now is any compression in the front of the hips. We don't want to have compression in the front of the hips. That's essentially the femur bone rubbing into the hip socket, and it will just cause some issues. So if that's the case, but your feet are comfortable like this, you can roll over a blanket and just place it into that hip space. That'll allow you to come forward, but will give you a bit of space. If that helps, great. If not, just come up a little way. So now we're going to really tune into the breath, and we're going to hold here for about another 8 rounds of breath. Release the back of the neck. Identify if there's any discomfort in your knees now you've been here a while. If there's discomfort in the knees, come up a little way, maybe even take your legs into a cross-legged pose. So another variation for these cow face poses is simple cross legs. It just doesn't get quite so deep into the outer hip. And I want to work right now the muscles and the connective tissue that connect to your iliotibial band. So we've talked about the plantar fascia and the sole of the foot. Another big piece of thick fascia that causes runners quite a lot of challenges is your iliotibial band. So that runs from the knee to the hip. Again, if that piece of fascia gets tight, or if the muscles that it joins to and surrounds get tight, it gets stuck, and then it pulls on your knee and you get a pain in the outer edge of the knee, often known as runner's knee. So you'll be given lots of different advice out there online in how to treat a tight IT band. But it is my preference to treat the muscles that attach to that piece of fascia. So we're getting into the outer hip muscles right now. One called the TFL, one called the glute medius. And in a minute, we're going to get into one called the QL. Bring your hands and press your hands into the mat. Come all the way back to seated. Stay here if you can. Right hand out to the side. Push the floor away from you with your right hand as you draw your left hip towards the floor. And then press that left hip down and inhale, bring your left hand past your left ear. Take it all the way over and grab the head. And then as you exhale, allow the body to soften. So unlike, again, a yang variation of this pose, but we could really get deep, we're actually trying to tap into the tissue as well as the muscle. And so muscle will stretch pretty quickly. It's pretty responsive. But connective tissue, much less so. It's there to protect. If you think of fascia like duct tape, it's holding the body together. It needs to be able to glide through and around the muscles and the joints. But if you move it too quickly, it will respond by tightening up even more. So it needs soft, slow, mindful movement. And as you stay here with your breath, you might find, yeah, I'm getting a little bit deeper. If you're taking a lot of weight onto this right hand, you can bring your cushion or a block and just bring your elbow or your forearm to that block. And we're going to be here for about another 3 rounds of breath. Then from here, slowly, mindfully coming all the way up. We just have a counter pose now, a little 3 or 4 breath twist. Lift your right knee up and take your left elbow around that right knee. So now the right foot's flat on the floor and just take a twist to the right. So actually I say counter, it's still getting into those same muscles around the outer hip and just works a little bit into releasing through the lower back. And so we're just here for about 1 more round of breath. And then we'll slowly come back to the center. And take your time to extend your legs out in front of you. Bring your hands behind you. Allow your feet to be like windscreen wipers. And allow those windscreen wipers to move the whole leg. So right up to the femur bone, through those shin bones. Good. And then we're going to come exactly the same poses on the other side. So you're either sitting on your block or you're sitting on the floor. Both sit bones need to be down. And your left heel is coming towards your left, your right heel is coming towards your left butt cheek. It always gets complicated when it comes to me and rights and lefts. And then you're going to bring your right foot pretty much in the same place that you just had it. So same variation, other side. You know how you've modified. Remember, as you come forward, left hip might be worse compression-wise. So listen out for any sensation in the front of that hip. Listen out for pain in the knee. And if it is painful in the knee, take the legs a little wider into a cross-legged pose. And then as you exhale, just come forward as far as your body will allow right now. So that's until the muscles start going, you start feeling those muscles. That's where you stop. And then over the course of the next 10 or 12 breaths, you're allowing the tissue to respond. And then you're allowing slowly the chest to come further forward. And so depending on how responsive your tissue is, how often you do this sort of work in your body, will depend on how quickly the tissue is to respond. So if you regularly move and mobilize and stretch the body, but don't spend time working on the connective tissue, then the connective tissue will still be less responsive for you. And so this just adds another tool to your ability to help your body recover, so that the next time you go run, your body's restored. And you'll feel it hopefully in your own bodies. But just to give you an example, my hips were really, really tight on Tuesday. And I did this practice on Tuesday evening. And on Wednesday morning, I woke up, I felt amazing. So whereas ordinarily, without the practice, the recovery just takes longer. You're stimulating the connective tissue. Therefore, you're stimulating the blood flow to that connective tissue. Now, anyone who's had an injury in a ligament or a tendon will know that there's very little blood flow into the connective tissue. So this is stimulating that response within the body. And then slowly press into the hands and come all the way up. So we're going to come out to the other side now. We're going to bring the left hand to the floor. Push the floor away from us so that we can ground that right hip. So it just gives us a nice stable starting point. And then inhale, the right hand lifts up to the sky. And then exhale, lean it over. Grab the left ear and allow your body to soften and settle. So it's fine to close the eyes as you do these practices. In fact, it's highly encouraged. If you can close the eyes, it takes away first and foremost any external influences that you may have. It allows us to better tune in to our own body and better pick up on our own sensations within that body. So the more you do this sort of body work, the more you'll actually be able to feel the tissue releasing, just like you're used to feeling a muscle stretch. If you come down and you think it would be really nice to prop up the left arm, do so. I really like that. It just takes some weight out of my shoulder, allows me to get a little deeper. And we're going to be here for about another 3 rounds of breath. And slowly make your way back up to seated. Just bring your left foot to the floor, grab your left knee with your right elbow and take a little count, a little twist. Nice. So we're just here for a couple breaths. And so the last pose we're going to do, you can do in many variations. And one of the variations can be up a wall. So if you've got a blank wall, you can bring your hips up against the wall and we're going to lift the legs up against the wall. I'm going to talk you through an elevated hip as we do this, so it becomes more of an inversion. And I really like that actually. I've really found that it helps to release a little bit more of the tissue around my hips. So bring yourself a block or a blanket, maybe if your blanket's just this size, a couple, so you get a bit more height. I'm going to use a block for this. You use whatever you've got access to, and I'm going to have the block on this setting. So we're going to come lie down on the mat, and I'm going to bring my block right to the bony structure at the back of my pelvis. So not to my lower back. It's not touching my spine, it's touching my sacrum and the back of my hips. So from there, I'm just going to extend the legs up to the sky. And then once I get there, I might just want to fiddle and get comfortable. So if you're choosing to do this up the wall, you're just going to stick with the wall variation. If you're choosing to do this on a cushion or block, we're going to do a little bit of forward-backward splits work as well as we stay here. So close off your eyes and bring your hands on your belly. And take a breath into your belly. And allow the body to soften and let go. Allow the hips to be supported by the block. And allow the muscles of the legs not having to do very much to be here. So if those legs are shaking, then I would advise you drop this a little, or you take your legs to the wall. You don't want that muscle to be firing right now. And then feel the weight of your legs. And feel how the bones in your legs are sinking deeper into your hip socket. You'll notice maybe some tingling sensations in the toes, and that's the old toxinated blood running back to your heart. So right now our legs and our hips are higher than our heart, and that's encouraging the blood flow back to that organ. So the job of the heart obviously is to pump blood around the body, but it has quite a job to bring the blood from the feet and the ankles and the calves all the way back up to the heart. So we're just helping that process. Again, it's all about aiding a recovery so we can go run again. Nice. So then once we've been here a while, slowly allow your left leg to draw towards you as you extend your right leg away from you. So you're just doing a forward-backward splits with the legs. Obviously, you're not doing the splits, but this just helps us access into the front of the pelvis. You might feel the blood coming back to that right foot. You might feel the weight of the foot allowing the hips to lift a little, so you're in a variation of bridge pose with one leg up in the sky. This is just a restorative variation. So no muscles of the hips are working right now. They are supported wholeheartedly by the block. Nice. So we're here for about another 2 rounds of breath. And then be mindful as you come back to the center, bend your right knee as you draw it in. Extend your right leg up. Look at the difference in the colour between your right and your left foot. The left one will be white and the right white one likely gone red again as the new blood has gone and flushed back to that foot. So let's do it the other way. Let's bring some colour back into that left leg. Extend the left leg as you draw the right leg towards you. Feel free to bend this right knee. It doesn't matter. You don't really want to feel it pulling right up into the insertion point of the hamstring. You don't want it to feel pulling behind the knee. So just allow the body to be wherever it feels comfortable. You shouldn't be working to be here. We're just using gravity to create some length in the back of the thigh and across the front of the hips. So allow the body to slowly move. It might feel like you're moving it, but you're not. It's just the tissue moving. And the weight of gravity allowing that left heel to drop a little closer towards the floor. And you're here for another 3 rounds of breath. And slowly bring that left knee towards you. Just take a look at that right foot. Oh, it's nice and rouge. Once again, bend the knees, remove the block. Bring the feet to the floor, the knees mat distance apart, and allow the knees to drop into one another. Just take a few moments here. So before we go straight into Shavasana, we're just allowing the spine to settle a little bit from its inversion. Nice. And then choose how your back, depending on how your back's feeling, either stay here or extend your legs out in front of you. And we're going to take 2 or 3 minutes in Shavasana. Palms face the sky, allow the body to feel heavy. And allow the body to physically let go. So as we've travelled through this practice, we've stimulated the calmer side of our nervous system to aid recovery, to aid rest. We've stretched the muscles that get tight when we use them repetitively to push our entire body weight off the floor every time we touch down. We've hydrated the ligaments and the tendons by applying a good stress to those spaces, not to stretch them, but just to give them a little bit of tension to encourage blood flow there. And we've taken time to allow the fascia in the body an opportunity to unstick, to release from the muscle, to glide better over the muscles, so it better does its job for us. We've been pretty attentive to plantar fascia and iliotibial band. But know that fascia surrounds the entire body like we're duct taped together. For the last minute, we stay here. Allow the breath to return to its natural ebb and flow. And allow the mind to simply follow the breath. And before you bring any movement back into the body, just take an opportunity to feel the whole body. Feel how the body's surrendered. Shavasana, arguably one of the hardest poses, because we're just required to do nothing. It's arguably one of the most important poses of the entire practice. Bring some movement to your fingers and your toes,
Walk your knees in towards your chest and just take a little rock. Nice. And then when you're ready, you can rock over to your right hand side. Keep the eyes closed, press into the floor. And bring yourself into a seated place, back of the pelvis on the floor, hands on the thighs. Palms together in the heart space. Thank you so much for taking the time to practice and learn with me. If you like these videos, feel free to subscribe to the channel. Namaste.